notification there on your end, just acknowledging that. And we do record these meetings, so they'll be available to you. If you have a neighbor that wasn't able to be with us tonight, wants to watch this, they'll have access to that on Metro's Traffic Calming website. Another thing is you all do have the ability to unmute yourself and make any comments or ask questions as we go. I invite you to do that. We try to keep these meetings fairly formal. We're a pretty small group here tonight, and so feel free to break in anytime and get clarification or ask a question. That'd be just fine. You can also type in a question using the chat feature if you see that. I try to keep that up and monitor that as we go as well, if you'd rather just type that in. I think that's about it. Again, I am a consultant with Birch Transportation. We're a group here in Nashville that helps administer the traffic calming program on behalf of the city. Three main things that we're gonna do this evening. We're going to give you a little bit of an overview of the program, and I'll stress that little bit because this is actually our second meeting on Graybar. I don't know if any of you were here when we met just right at a month ago, and we talked a little bit about this project. But if you weren't, there's good reason probably. We've expanded the project and invited some more of the neighbors in to view that. I'll talk a little bit more about that when I show you the limits of the project here in just a minute. So we're gonna do that very briefly, and then we're gonna look at the plan concept that we have developed to this point, and then we'll talk some about next steps as we wrap up this evening. But we'll try to be very efficient and respectful of your time. Again, thanks for joining us this evening. Just a little bit about the program. I think by now a lot of Nashvillians have gotten more and more used to the types of tools that we offer in traffic calming, and so we do focus on residential streets. We don't do a lot of traffic calming in commercial areas, industrial areas, and that kinds of thing. We recognize this as a safety issue and very much a quality of life issue for people living in residential areas and having to put up with some irresponsible driving behavior sometimes, unfortunately. And so we do bring physical solutions to bear. That's why the DOT is the one who administers this, because they are responsible for all things right of way. And so we use engineering solutions to try and bring about those slower speeds. And we do focus on speed reduction, and that's as opposed to trying to divert traffic to some other street. That's really not what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep traffic where it is by and large, but just get it to slow down and drive a little more responsibly. Traffic calming continues to be very much an in-demand program. When you all applied, there were over 500 streets that had similar issues that made the same type of an application into the program, and that continues to be the case. There's really more projects than we can get to, and so we do prioritize those. Usually we do about 50 projects a year, but this last summer there was some surplus budget monies that council saw fit to allocate toward traffic calming. Again, I think just because there were so many requests around the county for the program. But when we do prioritize, this is how we do it. We shared some of this information last time. About 70% of the score that ranks these projects is probably what you expect that it is. It's data revolving around traffic speeds and traffic volumes. The other 30% has to do with other users of the road, pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users. Those types of folks really suffer probably more from fast speeds on our street than about anybody. So we roll all of this information every time there's a new application window that opens, and we get a lot more applications come in. We collect all of this data for all of those streets, roll that into a composite score, and rank those. And fortunately or unfortunately, I guess, Graybar was near the top of that list and got selected in this latest round. So that's why we're here and doing this project, or at least offering the project to you. And here's some of the data that we collected. It is a 25 mile an hour posted speed, as most residential streets are in Nashville now. And 85th percentile speed is just a statistical way we look at the speed, and that was measured at 34. It's not the fastest we've seen, but certainly not the slowest. It's kind of a middle, maybe on just a slightly lower than average 85th percentile speed for the projects that we're doing traffic calming on. The volume, though, is pretty high. It's maybe on the higher side of streets that we do. We will do traditional traffic calming up to 5,000 cars a day, so we're well within our threshold for that. But we are just a little above 3,200 cars a day on the street, and it does vary some in width. It's a little narrower actually up toward Hillsborough Road, but that's pretty consistent, somewhere 18 to 20 feet or so. That will become important to us as we start to lay out a potential traffic calming solution. But for now, that's a pretty standard width, maybe slightly on the narrower side in terms of metro streets, which is actually a good thing when it comes to trying to slow traffic down. And then the length of the project is about 0.6 of a mile long. Now, the change that we made since last time when we were here a month ago, we were looking at Graybar, but we were only looking from Hillsborough Road down to Hopkins. There had been a couple of applications in, and so it was decided by the city that we would extend this project from Hopkins all the way down to Belmont. So now we're looking at that section from Hillsborough to Belmont. We like it from a technical standpoint because it just sort of makes sense. It's a stop at both ends of that segment of street. We recognize Graybar continues to go further than Belmont, but that makes a good section break here and kind of a logical project for us. Hopkins was just kind of floating out in the middle. It's just sort of you're driving up Graybar and all of a sudden you encounter some traffic calming. We're going to talk about speed cushions. Encounter those at Hopkins. We like going all the way to Belmont better from a technical perspective. And so here's what that looks like on a map. This is a map that's available to you on Metro's website. It is an interactive map, so you can pan around and zoom in and so forth. But you may see the text is small there, but you may see Graybar running east-west, right, roughly in the middle of the page there. And so you see our limits from Hillsborough Road over to Belmont. You see some other streets there as well. The green color indicates that those are projects that we are currently working on. There's in various levels of development. Then you see some other colors there. You see blue dotted lines. Those indicate that there is a traffic calming project that has been installed. And so that may be helpful if you're not familiar with some of the tools that we use. You can go down and drive on those, experience those. And then the purple lines are streets that have applied for traffic calming but have not yet been selected. So any of that information may be helpful to you, and it's available here on this map. We talked last time about some of the tools that we use. I'm not going to go through all of those again, but I will cover the big ones, which are speed cushions, and we discussed how this has become really the bread and butter of this program, and it's really what traffic calming is known for, and I think largely what people got used to seeing when they engage the traffic calming program. But speed cushions are manufactured. They're a high density rubber. They come from a factory, which means to us that they are very consistent. We know the product we're getting. We know how it holds up. We know how traffic behaves when it encounters these, and it's given us a good result in a lot of different projects across the city. They're only about 3 inches tall, but most people will tell you, and if you drive down these streets, you probably find that that's tall enough to bring about a change in speed, slower speeds. They're 6 feet wide, and then we have some variability in how long we can make them. The reason they have these brakes in them, as you see, is just emergency vehicle considerations. Those bigger wheelbase vehicles like ambulances and fire engines and those things can get down the street not being quite so impacted by these, and so that's the reason we've really gone to speed cushions almost exclusively on metro streets. The other thing is we can lay these out. You see in these pictures here sets of 2 or sets of 3, and then sometimes there's plastic delineators off to the side. All of that is done in our design process just to make sure that people cannot drive around these. We've had some experiences. Some of them go back many years, but really in the Green Hills area of people trying to do that. But and we know that happens, so we design these installations so that people have to drive over them. We'll come back to that if there's any questions more about these. The other tool that we use pretty often, and again, you've seen some of these around Green Hills as well as other areas, are the radar feedback signs. Pretty self-explanatory. They give you some feedback on how fast you're going, and so we will install these some. I guess a couple of different conditions. One is if there's more than 5,000 cars a day, like we mentioned, is really our cutoff for speed cushions. If the street has more than that, or it's more than 35 miles an hour sign, we will use something like a feedback sign. Also, in the course of a traffic calmed or a speed cushion street, we do have some limitations. We don't install those on steep hills or sharp curves. Some streets have one driveway after the next, and we've got a policy. We stay at least 15 feet away from driveways. Sometimes that's just not possible. And when we encounter those types of conditions, we may supplement with a feedback sign. But it's a good tool. I think the effectiveness is probably not quite as significant or long lasting as the speed cushions, but can be a good tool at times. All right, so this is what I want to show you. Let me point out a couple of things on this slide just to orient you here. You see the stop sign there at the left-hand side of the page. That's our limit at Hillsborough Road. And then the purple line is just outlining Graybar Lane. And then we go on the right-hand side of the page to the other stop sign at Belmont Boulevard. You hopefully can see some of the labels on some of the streets there along the way. This is our concept plan, where we are currently for what we think the traffic calming project would look like on Graybar. It's a series of 5 sets of speed cushions that run from one end of the project to the other. I'll share with you how we arrive at that. We take the whole length of this project, which is a little over 3,100 feet. And we will divide that by what we want the spacing to be on those cushions. And what we have determined, our experience is we get the best result if we can have a spacing between those sets of speed cushions somewhere in the I'd say 400 to 600 foot range. It could be a little shorter, could be a little longer. And we just look at that depending on the land use context and things like that. So we divide that in and we come up with a set of ideal set of number of sets of speed cushions, and then kind of place those at equal points along the route. The one thing that I know is kind of a design consideration for us on this street is we're aware of the hill, kind of crest the hill just a little bit east of Hopkins, and it goes pretty steep down to about Amanda. So we've taken that into a consideration here. You see some speed cushions kind of right at the crest there, and right as it starts to level out just a little bit, just west of Amanda. I would point out that this is preliminary. This is a concept. We'll be out on the street. We kind of do this from a desktop, so we have a pretty good feel that this would work, but we'll be out on the street actually taking a few more measurements. And so these may shift a little bit here or there, and we may make some changes based on those grades that we measure and driveway locations and things like that. So I wanted to, we like to at this point get some feedback from you. If you haven't seen this, and I guess nobody has seen anything that would be east of Hopkins. What I showed you last time just went from Hillsborough to Hopkins. So any thoughts or comments or questions that you have on the concept that you're looking at here? And again, if you join a little bit later, feel free to you should be able to unmute yourself or put anything you want to in the chat box there. And if you don't have any comments and you said this is about what you expected, that's okay too. See one voice of support of going to Belmont. Thank you for that. We really do think that makes the most sense from a technical standpoint. Taking it from one um, terminus of the street to the other. I think that'll be a much more understood kind of a driver expectation type of a consideration there. We like that. You guys are easy. No questions?
Oh, hello.
Hello, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Hi, yes, I actually have a question. I actually live right down on the corner of Graybar and Belmont, right there, near the C speed hump. And I know at the end of the street people speed down, but which would be great. I think the speed bumps are gonna help with the traffic and then the speeding. But at the end of the street, there's always wrecks, and I'm not sure it has to do even with like the speeding, but like the cut through on Graybar and then all the backed up people on Belmont and people trying to turn but turning around, people turning and people trying to go one way across the street, and there's a wreck like, I don't know, every couple months there's a wreck there. So is this just
Yeah.
is that a different kind of project, or is this not the same kind of area
No,
you
that's
guys are?
yeah. Well, that's a really good question and good observation. My hunch is just knowing how that Belmont and Graybar intersection is. It's probably Belmont. You guys could tell me it probably backs up from Woodmont up into this area. And then when you're trying to turn out of Graybar on the Belmont, I could see that there's cars there, there's congestion, and people maybe taking uh, shorter gap than what they should be doing, and those occur. It might affect that. My hunch is probably not that much unless traffic is speeding so significantly they're kind of blowing through that stop sign, which we hear that a lot too. That these stop signs are kind of suggestions on a lot of the streets that we're working with, and so that could be part of it. But my guess is it's more related to congestion on Belmont. In which case this won't really affect that probably one way or the other.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Well, I'm going to keep going, but if you think of anything and want to chime in, we'll be happy to come back to this slide. But I do want to share with you a couple of next steps or where we head from here. If this looks like it's kind of what you expected to see from a speed cushion program, that'd be great. Here's probably it looks probably more complicated than it really is. Sort of flow chart of where we go. So we're here at the Red Neighborhood meeting, and what we will do after tonight is take any more feedback that you got, or if we've got it pretty good, we'll continue into that design process. We'd say 2 months. We probably don't need that long, but give us a couple of weeks, and in that amount of time, we will have a full set of design plans. So what you just saw, I know is not a lot of detail there, but the design plans will show complete detail, to the level of showing you exactly where the cushions would be located. Usually we reference that off the driveway, so it'll say something like, 62 feet from the driveway at 123 uh, Graybar Lane, something like that. That will be made available to you. We'll post those design plans on NDOT's website, and we do that in advance of the ballot. And so once the plans are posted on the website, that's when we'll send out the ballot cards. I'll show you a little more information on that. And that ballot process is a mandatory 6-week time period. At the end of the 6 weeks, we'll take all those results, and if it does pass, then we'll move it into the construction queue. And that's where the bad news is. That construction queue right now is about a year long. So I hate that. If you're in favor of these, I know it takes a long time, but we do like to set those expectations so that you guys aren't thinking that you'll see something out there by Easter. It's gonna take a little time. A little bit more information on the ballot process. We send ballot cards to owners, property owners on this section of the street, Graybar from Hillsborough to Belmont. If you own property that abuts the right of way there, you'll get one of these cards. There's a few intricacies here on this project. I know we have some condominium units and so forth. So if you have questions about who would get a card, feel free to let me know. But we'll send those out. Again, that voting period will stay open for 6 weeks. And the card looks like this, and it's just got a QR code that will take you to a Nashville.gov ballot page where you just give them basic information, name, address, that you own the property, and you can vote yes or no on that. And then again, if 2/3 of the votes that we collect are in favor, we'll move that project forward. Sorry, I had not advanced my slide there, but you should see it there. A little bit more information. This is a snapshot of just a sample of the street and who all would get to vote. It gets a little interesting here on the western end of the project, but essentially it's the condominium units. Everyone that owns one of those units, because they all own in common that property adjacent to Graybar, they all do get a ballot and vote. And then everybody else is pretty straightforward as you come down the line. I don't know that we have any vacant parcels. We don't send them to vacant parcels. If anyone owns more than one piece of property, they only get one vote. And then I think everything probably here is residential, I guess, with the exception of the church down at the Belmont. And we usually do send them to churches. And if we have any schools, things like that, they usually do ballot. Businesses we do not send them to. If you do think of other questions or have other comments and would like to get that information to us, feel free to do that. Here's our contact information. I'm Jeff. I'm the one in green below. And then you feel free to send that also to the Metro personnel that work with the program. It's just a generic email address because there's more than one staff person that has access to that. So they kind of share that email address. So feel free to reach out to one or both of those addresses with any other questions, comments, concerns that you have. I did say that I would share with you their website. So if you wanted to take a closer look at that map, you can see design plans for old projects. You can see the voting history about how many projects have passed versus failed. All of that is on there. You can also, when this meeting is, as I mentioned, is being recorded, when it's uploaded, it'll be available here. So there's a lot of resources there. All things traffic calming in Nashville, they're on that website. So feel free to avail yourself of that. I don't want to keep anyone any longer than we need to, but I'll be glad to talk more about the plan, or if you have any questions, anything about that. I should mention this too. You may have noticed in this flow chart, there's an opportunity for an optional meeting. We used to do a mandatory 2 meetings, but we got to where more often than not, way more often than not, that second meeting was just kind of like a rehash of the first meeting. So we quit doing it, but we always keep that available if anybody, if we think we have big design changes that need to happen, we're happy to get back together again. But it sounds like most people are kind of with the same understanding about what the project offers and how that would go. So we may not need to do that on this one. All right. Well, I'm not going to keep you. If Nobody has any other questions, comments? Appreciate your attendance tonight. Thanks for taking a few minutes here to learn about the project. And we'll go ahead then and move into the design phase. And the next thing you will hear from us, more than likely, is getting that card in the mail. So give us a few weeks on that, and we'll move the project along. Thanks everybody for joining in, and feel free again to reach out to us by email if you think of anything in the meantime. Be glad to get back with you on that. Thanks. Have a good evening.